So I had an aspiring stand-up comedian sitting in your chair,
Right.
and he had his lifelong dream was to be a stand-up comedian, right? He actually went to community college. I can't remember which one. There's a course in stand-up comedy, and so I asked him, "Can you teach funny?" And then can you? But my question for you is, can you teach someone to be a salesperson, or are you born with those qualities?
Well, one of the myths, I think, of sales is that you'll hear a lot of people say they have to have the gift of the gab. You got to be able to, chat people up and blah, blah. And my experience is the really good salespeople aren't big talkers. They ask good questions. They do their research and make sure that when they're in front of the customer, they ask them really good questions, and then they listen. There are people who have some natural talent for sales, but there are a lot of techniques that you can convey and they can learn. Because,
well, do you have to be an extrovert? I mean, when I look at you, when I think of Dave Moulton, you're a lot of these qualities you're arguably born with them. So you're extroverted, charismatic, charming, funny, etc., etc. All the things I'm not. You can't teach that. But I mean, were your parents extroverts? Where did you get all that from?
Well, what's interesting is my dad was a credit manager.
Right.
So I was telling you.
So he was hilarious.
Well, two things. One is that I'm the oldest of 9, and 4 of us ended up in sales. Nobody ended up in credit.
Of 9. So yes, you mentioned before you were Catholic.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. Well, I'm a recovering.
Certain
Catholic.
things are lining up here.
But so my dad was credit manager. So which is often seen as the opposite of sales, because oftentimes credit managers will tell salespeople they can't make the deal because they haven't cleared credit.
So if you had students, I mean, you've had a lot of students. You've been there almost 20 years. If they're just like painfully introvert, would you counsel them to maybe have you done that to find something else, or?
Yeah, well, it depends on
the young,
student.
though.
Because there's a book by, Daniel Pink has written 2 very good books. One is Drive, which I just described, and the other one that I use actually in my introductory sales course is called To Sell is Human. And what he has found through his study, and I think he had 7,000 respondents. It's actually a fairly detailed study, but he called them ambiverts. That is, you had an element of invert and an element of extrovert. So if you're too extroverted or too introverted, you're not going to be a successful salesperson. So you need to be, and it's true for a lot of things.
You can just be too much.
Well, so in sales, there's this contradiction between ego drive on the one hand, right, and empathy on the other. And so what I tell students is you want to be somewhere in the middle with both of them, because if you're too empathetic, you're never going to ask for the order.
Right.
If you're too ego-driven, you're going to beat up and run over your customer. So if you have, you're in the range in the middle in terms of both empathy. So I have enough empathy to understand where you're coming from, but I've got enough ego drive that if I really believe in what I'm promoting, I'm going to ask you for the order.